Well, of course, we know there's Bhai Dooj, there's Govardhan Puja, there's, part of Deepavali still continuing, and today is the FICQ Diwali, which will be taking place at King George Square from 11 a.m. till 11 p.m. in the night. So if you get a chance, make sure that you do go and visit. There'll be lots of stalls, cultural items, and of course the VIPs on the stage, some official parts is inevitable, but they do take part of the program as well. So the FICQ's annual Diwali celebration is happening from 11 a.m. today at King George Square. Make sure you do visit that. Well, right now, there's so much else happening, and of course, Diwali this year has been bigger than ever, as they reckon. And it is wonderful to see all communities coming together to celebrate, and even on social media, you can see everyone's been putting on Happy Diwali messages, Hindus and non-Hindus as well. So you don't have to be a Hindu to celebrate Diwali. Diwali is for everyone. So it is the victory of good over evil and light over darkness. So yesterday was the Amavasya night, which is one of the darkest night. So Hindu calendar is set in that way. It does not just follow dates and numbers. It is based on very, very, accurate mathematical calculations, and of course it's based on the planetary movements, and those were done, they were computed ages ago, prehistoric, and from that time until date today they are spot on without a second's difference. So everything that's been predicted, the eclipses, then everything, that's how the time is measured again. So when they reckon, why does the Diwali date change? Because it follows the Hindu calendar and not the Georgian calendar. That's why the date changes, because that particular point where the planets and everything come in, and when those things are calculated in that scientific manner. Well, having said that much, right now let's get back into today's news. Well, first of all, Prime Minister's back. Welcome back, Prime Minister.
Around the world and back again. Scott Morrison's bruising international trip is done, but he's come home with some extra baggage. The G20 meeting in Rome was supposed to be the first stitch in mending relations with France.
I know that the Prime Minister has had to take some pretty hard decisions. This was one of them.
But anger about the dumping of a $90 billion submarine contract has become a personal dispute between Prime Minister and President about whether Scott Morrison lied and then leaked private communications in an effort to prove he didn't.
Well, the only thing that the Prime Minister has accomplished on this trip is proving that he can't be trusted.
He hasn't admitted it, but the government is defending it nonetheless.
The claim was pretty extraordinary, and it needed to be refuted.
Trust is something that needs to be earned, but once it's lost, it's very hard to get it back.
Labor, spotting a weakness, has doubled down on its criticism, accusing the Prime Minister of compromising Australia's security for the sake of his personal reputation.
We've seen a leader who did that, and that person was Donald Trump.
It's not just about France. The diplomatic community in Canberra can talk of nothing else but the Prime Minister's handling of this. Some share Paris's outrage, others think the French have overreacted, but almost all are uneasy at the prospect of private communications being leaked into the public realm.
Peace and security.
Foreign Affairs Minister Maurice Payne will be touring Southeast Asian nations in the next few days to allay regional concerns about the new submarine deal. As for mending relations with France,
we've got some ideas that we're working on as to how we can rebuild that relationship. I think it will take some time. There's no doubt about that.
It's a work in progress. Melissa Clark, ABC News, Canberra.
And of course, that is a work in progress. And as we know, that did you see that in that clip, Anthony Albanese, in the Hindu temple, and he looked quite cool and charmed in that, in his. With that garland and mala. So, it's wonderful to see that, as we mentioned before, that Diwali is being very, very widely spread as per this report.
2 years apart, they were finally reunited in June.
Now this Diwali is pretty special for us because he is with us, you know. It's a complete family.
For Hindus, Diwali marks the return of Lord Ram, one of the most revered deities, back to his kingdom after 14 years of exile. To celebrate his homecoming, people light up their houses with diyas or clay lamps.
Diwali is the largest festival for India and related to Sora, and the first celebration we're having after the lockdown.
The celebrations have already begun in Melbourne's west, home to one of the city's largest Indian diaspora.
We absolutely love it, and I miss my family at this special time.
It brings the culture, people from different states together and we celebrate. Happy Diwali!
For the past 18 months, this area has been some of the worst COVID. But these Melburnians are determined to recover and brighten the darkest of night as we wish everyone a very happy Diwali.
And isn't that wonderful to see that happening? That report is a day old, but of course, Melbourne coming out of the lockdown and celebrating Diwali with everyone together is just a wonderful, wonderful feeling. Well, as per our first news, that Prime Minister is back, but what did actually happen there? Have any deals been struck? And what about China, Russia, and India?
China is the elephant not in the room at COP26. So what good are Glasgow agreements anyway if the leader, whose country is responsible for around 28% of the world's carbon emissions, isn't even there? And what of the fossil fuel reliance and climate goals of China, India and Russia, who, combined, make up 2/5 of the world's emissions?
China is very coal dependent. China imports a lot of oil, they import even more gas, fossil gas.
I indicated that China and Russia not showing up in Saudi Arabia was a problem. I think it's been a big mistake, quite frankly, for China, with respect to China not showing up.
Despite an absence from Glasgow, President Xi Jinping submitted China's new 2030 targets to the UN last week.
In the past 15 years, the cut of China's carbon emission intensities has greatly exceeded the climate action goals of 2020.
President Xi has already committed to peak emissions before 2030. He's already committed to net zero emissions before 2060. And so the fact he's absent from the actual in-person COP discussions, to me, is largely immaterial. China has set the stage with enormous global ambition.
Not only will China's carbon emissions peak before 2030, they intend to reduce something called carbon intensity, a measure of emissions per unit of gross domestic product, a key indicator for the world's economic powerhouse, by 65% by 2030. Crucially, for a country in which coal accounts for around 60% of energy supply, they plan on cutting all fossil fuels in energy to 75% by 2030, a sign that China intends to continue its dominance in zero carbon emissions technologies.
China, in my view, is already the world's largest developer of zero emissions industries of the future. They're the largest investor, and China is talking about building 1,200 gigawatts of wind and solar. And just to put that in an Australian context, that is 20 times the entire electricity generating capacity of Australia.
Unlike all other participants at Glasgow who've signed up to net zero by 2050, Russia only plans to reduce emissions by 80% in that year. President Putin, absent from Glasgow, instead sent a pre-recorded message affirming that Russia will strive for carbon neutrality by 2060.
We don't just want to reach carbon neutrality, but make it so that in the nearest 3 decades, the accumulated volume of greenhouse gas emissions in Russia is less than even for our neighbours in the European Union.
His tundra is burning. He's in literally the tundra is burning. He has serious climate problems.
Russia intends to use its vast forests as a carbon sink and did sign up to Glasgow's agreement to end and reverse deforestation by 2030. But as a major gas supplier to Europe, Russia refused to join with more than 100 countries pledging methane cuts, as did Australia and India.
India is the only big economy in the world that has delivered both in letter and spirit on its Paris commitments.
India's announcement at Glasgow of a net zero target 2 decades after the US and 10 years later than China has been widely received as a strategic move.
So India's committed to net zero emissions by 2070, a very conservative target. They've also committed within that to a 45% emissions intensity of economic growth, a 45% reduction by 2030. That is really important to get on the path to decarbonisation. They committed to 500 gigawatts of renewables by 2030.
The developing country, vulnerable to climate change with an emerging middle class, is seeking $1 trillion in climate finance, mainly from developed countries further down the decarbonisation pathway.
Prime Minister Modi has left a huge amount of room on the table. He's emphasising the common but differentiated responsibilities. He's emphasising that the Paris Agreement involved the OECD helping fund the energy decarbonisation of emerging markets.
Unlike China, which is relying on transition fuels, India could leapfrog into zero-emissions industries.
We're seeing India building out its solar manufacturing capacity, talking about a green hydrogen strategy and electric vehicles and lithium-ion batteries.
With Glasgow coming to the pointy end of negotiations, the promises and actions of the world's developing nations and big polluters so far has been mixed. Hedging their bets, not wanting or needing to lead in conquering emissions challenges, while the first world still grapples with theirs.
So that a beautiful report there, very well presented. As we know, these are the targets that we are working with, and good to see that India has got top scores on that. Right now, the Australian Medical Association report card shows that hospitals remain packed.
The Australian Medical Association's latest public hospital report card shows that hospitals remain overwhelmed and are under-resourced even during quiet periods, which is the worry. Dr Omar Khorshid is the organisation's president and he joins us now from Perth. Omar, good morning. It's a pretty disturbing report card, this one.
Morning, Michael. Yes, this was really the best of circumstances for public hospitals last year when, of course, we were all in lockdown. The demand on emergency departments really plummeted and, of course, elective surgery was paused. And yet the performance of hospitals in some states barely improved and in others it actually continued to decline. And of course, since then, we've seen things get so much worse with real increase in demand that no one was really expecting. And of course, we've also had the Delta outbreaks in Sydney, Melbourne and ACT since then. So when we look forward, it's a really concerning picture with the lowest number of beds per head of population over 65 that we've ever had. And it's a situation that our state and territory governments and our national government really need to work together to resolve.
I want to get to the path forward, but just some of the figures quoted in this report, particularly relating to emergency departments, a 1 in 3 chance of being seen on time in the worst performing jurisdiction. Which is that?
So when it comes to emergency departments, it's ACT at the bottom of the pile. And the sad thing about this report is it really does show, as it does each year, how much it matters where you live in Australia as to what access to public hospitals you have. When it comes to elective surgery waiting lists, it's Tasmania that has the worst performance in our report card this year and certainly for a little while. Again, pointing to a system that just doesn't have the capacity to meet the needs of Tasmanians. So what we'd really like to see is some concerted effort to address the long-term trends here, that this is not brand new news. And this, as I said, is a year where really hospitals should have done pretty well compared with how they have in the past.
Okay, well, what action would you like? National Cabinet's meeting today. It's an effort that requires input from both state territories and the federal government. What is the best way forward to address these issues, in your view?
Well, we'd like to see the long-term trends reversed. So rather than continuing with a way of funding public hospitals that really only looks at throughput and where the states pick up the bulk of the tab, or just over half, the Commonwealth a little bit less than half, it's a system that doesn't actually in any way encourage state governments to build new hospitals, to employ new nurses and new doctors in order to meet that demand. So we'd like to see that the funding package actually change in its nature so that it does encourage investment and also rewarding hospitals for better performance. But probably the key thing outside our hospital system that needs to be looked at too is how we get that demand down. With an ageing population, people living longer with chronic diseases, that is part of why we see such extraordinary demand on our hospital system. And we need to make sure that our primary care system, our general practitioners and other people working in that sector are doing everything they can to keep people well in the community, in their aged care facilities, so they're not needing to access hospital in the first place.
And there you go. That's that report once again. Well, right now it's time to go to our daily India report. With that, let's welcome Ankita.
Welcome to the Daily India report that brings you glimpses of the changing India and the growing engagement of the Indian diaspora with India. We greet you today on the occasion of Indian festival of Diwali, which is celebrated in India and around the world. We wish you the beginning of a happy, prosperous, peaceful and pandemic-free new year. In our first story, India received a big Diwali gift. Indigenous COVID-19 vaccine maker Bharat Biotech's Covaxin received the approval on 3rd November from WHO for emergency use listing. Travelers vaccinated with Covaxin are now allowed to enter the United States and many countries of the world starting November 8th. India's indigenously created and manufactured Covaxin vaccination against COVID-19 was granted approval by the World Health Organization for emergency use listing. Covaxin is India's first homegrown vaccine manufactured in Hyderabad by Bharat Biotech. The WHO clearance is a significant step in Covaxin being accepted by foreign governments. It will remove uncertainty around overseas travel by Indians inoculated with this vaccine. Moreover, emergency use listing is also a prerequisite for a vaccine to be supplied through COVAX, the Global COVID Vaccine Equity Scheme. The emergency use listing comes after a lengthy and rigorous review period. Bharat Biotech provided the first batch of data in July. This data is carefully reviewed by experts for the assurances about the vaccine's safety, efficacy and stability, as well as checks of production facilities. The delay had caused a lot of personal, professional and financial problems for tens of millions of Indians. It was a huge problem for Indian students studying abroad in countries like Canada, the US, the UK and Australia. Covaxin is one of the 6 vaccines that have received emergency use authorization from India's drug regulator and is being used in the nationwide inoculation program along with Covishield and Sputnik V. The WHO confirmed that Covaxin had been found to be, quote, 78% effective against COVID-19 of any severity 14 or more days after the second dose and is extremely suitable for low and middle income countries due to easy storage requirements, end quote. Bharat Biotech said the grant of the EUL was a very significant step towards ensuring global access to India's widely administered, safe and efficacious vaccine. Meanwhile, the United States has updated its list of approved vaccines and given green light to those who have been inoculated with Covaxin to enter the country. The revised rules will come into effect from November 8 when the US opens its border to vaccinated foreign travelers. The approval, which comes after a long wait, will allow for a large recognition of Covaxin by other countries to allow Indian travellers who have taken the dose to qualify for exemptions that countries offer to those vaccinated. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi greets Indians and Indian diaspora on Diwali, also called Deepavali. Modi is spending the festival with army personnel at border outposts in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi extended greetings to Indians and the Indian diaspora on the auspicious occasion of Diwali, the festival of lights. Wishing everyone a very happy Diwali, the Prime Minister hoped that the auspicious occasion brings happiness, prosperity and good fortune to the lives of his fellow citizens. On Diwali every year since assuming his office in 2014, Prime Minister Narendra Modi travels to the frontiers of India's border points. He will spend 2021 Diwali with soldiers of the Indian Army in the Nawshera sector along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir's Rajouri district. India is gradually normalizing the coronavirus disease scenario and studies show a high prevalence of COVID antibodies among people. More than 1 billion doses of vaccines have been administered. High-frequency indices on the economy and mobility are also looking up, making the projections for Diwali 2021 a lot better than 2020. But experts still advise caution as 248 million cases and 5 million deaths across the world so far indicate its danger before lowering the guard against the viral disease. India gave a Diwali gift to its citizens. Government has slashed petrol, diesel prices as the federal Indian government cut value-added tax on fuel. The Indian government has announced a Diwali gift by slashing the excise duty rate on both petrol and diesel fuels, thus bringing down retail rates. The excise duty will be reduced by 5 rupees for petrol and 10 rupees for diesel from November 4th. The centre has also urged states to commensurately reduce the value-added tax on petrol and diesel to give relief to consumers. Subsequently, multiple states heeded the central government's advice to bring down the petrol and diesel prices. Domestic prices of both fuels have touched record highs on the back of a steep rise in crude oil cost. Petrol has already breached the 100 rupees per litre mark and above in several cities in India, whereas diesel is not far behind. The rise in transport fuels had raised concerns over a build-up of inflationary pressure, which has even concerned the Reserve Bank of India. The Finance Ministry in a statement a day before Diwali said the reduction in excise duty on diesel will be double that of petrol. The Indian farmers have, through their hard work, keeping the economic growth momentum going even during the lockdown phase. So the reduction in excise on diesel will come as a boost to the farmers during the upcoming Rabi season. In recent months, crude oil prices have witnessed a global upsurge. Consequently, domestic prices of petrol and diesel had increased in recent weeks, exerting inflationary pressure. The world has also seen shortages and increased prices of all forms of energy. The federal government in India says it is trying to ensure that there is no energy shortage in the country and that commodities such as petrol and diesel are available adequately to meet requirements. Driven by the enterprising ability of India's aspirational population, the Indian economy has witnessed a remarkable turnaround post the COVID-19 induced slowdown. All sectors of the economy, be it manufacturing, services or agriculture, are experiencing significant upward economic activity. The Indian Foreign Ministry is looking for military and research experts to respond to China's aggressive policy chances and actions along the line of actual control at the border. Against the backdrop of the ongoing India-China border dispute, the Indian Ministry of External Affairs is looking for experts on China for special projects and research. They should be retired Joint Secretary and Major General rank officers who would work at the Ministry's Center of Contemporary China Studies Division. The one expert for special projects has to be a military officer of retired Major General rank. Research would be led by a retired Joint Secretary level officer or a Major General rank officer. Experts must have knowledge of China, India-China relations and experience of engaging or working with the Chinese system. They should have lived or served in China and must have proficiency in the Chinese language. China is making unilateral changes at the line of actual control since May 2020. This leaves India no choice but to beef up security and create new mechanisms to deal with the emerging threat. 2 weeks ago, China took a unilateral decision to bring about legislation on land boundary law. India clearly stated that the Chinese decision can have implications on existing bilateral arrangements on border management. Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Arindam Bagchi said China's unilateral decision to bring about legislation that can have implications on India's existing bilateral arrangements on border management as well as on the boundary question is of concern to India. Rahul Dravid appointed head coach of the men's cricket team of India. Known as the Wall of Indian Cricket, Rahul Dravid has been appointed as the new head coach of the Indian men's cricket team by the Board of Control for Cricket in India's Cricket Advisory Committee. Dravid will take charge of the team from the upcoming home series against New Zealand, which begins on November 17th. Current coach Ravi Shastri's tenure comes to an end after the completion of the ongoing ICC T20 World Cup. The BCCI had invited applications for the said position on October 26 to appoint Shastri's successor. The Indian Cricket Board congratulated Ravi Shastri and the rest of the coaching staff for their successful tenure, in which the team attained several highs. Dravid said that it was an absolute honour for him to be appointed the head coach of the team. Dravid's former teammate and current president of the BCCI, Sourav Ganguly, welcomed Dravid for his new role and also praised his efforts in nurturing young cricketers in the country. Dravid previously coached the India under-19 side at the 2016 and the 2018 World Cup, where they finished runner-ups and champions respectively. Dravid has also overseen the progress of the India A sides until 2019, when he was appointed the head of the National Cricket Academy in Bengaluru. He was also the coach recently when a Shikhar Dhawan-led Indian team toured Sri Lanka earlier this year. Rahul Dravid had an illustrious career as a cricketer, which saw him become one of the legends of the game. He captained India to landmark Test series wins in England and West Indies and is the fourth highest run getter in the history of Test cricket with 13,288 runs in 164 matches. He also scored more than 10,000 runs in one-day internationals and was part of the Indian team that reached the final of the 2003 ICC World Cup. Bollywood khiladi Akshay Kumar and Bollywood Barbie Katrina Kaif sizzle in Suryavanshi peppy dance number. Producers have dropped the latest song of Bollywood's much-awaited upcoming film Suryavanshi. The song is a dance number Na Ja starring superstars Akshay Kumar and Katrina Kaif. The original track is by Punjabi singer Pav Dharia and was released in 2017. The revamped version has Akshay and Katrina shaking a leg and grooving to the track sung by Dharia, Nikita and composed by Tanishq Bagchi. Katrina shared a glimpse of the song on her Instagram. The 3-minute song opens in the trademark style of top action director Rohit Shetty. It has helicopters, cars and a huge crew of backdrop dancers. Both Akshay and Katrina look uber cool in their chic black outfits as they walk in the frame. Besides the lyrics which have been translated into Hindi, the song has the same vibe as the original number. However, the older version of the song was peppier and more upbeat. Suryavanshi is the fourth in a series of cult cop films by Rohit Shetty. The film stars Akshay as anti-terrorism squad chief DCP Veer Suryavanshi and also Katrina Kaif and Jackie Shroff. That's all for this bulletin of Daily India Report. Thank you for watching.
And thank you very much, Ankita, for that, the Daily India Report. And don't forget that tomorrow we have Aapki Sehat at 10 a.m. And of course, in this segment, we will be featuring guess who? Giri Sivaraman. Yes, he will be featuring in Aapki Sehat, interviewed by Dr. Cheryl Fernandez, and that's coming on tomorrow. And of course, we know that the FICQ Diwali is taking place today, and the Tamil Diwali is happening tomorrow. So there's lots of functions and events that are taking place, and I will be, from now on, maybe a little bit less, but there are still few Diwali functions in plan. The Diwali at SeaWorld is also happening on this Saturday as well. So well done to all the team, everyone who has helped organize Deepawalis. Well, until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me. And we'll see you tomorrow with Aapki Sehat and the news.